not advancing. Advance our slide. Dylan, advance the slide, please.
We did.
It says what to expect from your provider.
All right.
Recast.
So we're going to talk about what an MSP is. So the definition of an MSP is just really a managed service provider. And that is something that a lot of IT companies are or strive to be or try to be. And there's a difference. So in our world, Dax and I and our team here, we try to be proactive. Whereas in the past, most providers were reactive. So they were break fix. And this model has evolved over the last several years to where we do everything from patching to help you with budgets. Dax, you got a little color on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much touched on all the main points, really. But another thing is that we have the flexibility to kind of work with you sometimes a little bit more on, like Carrie said, just kind of planning out your budgets, really working with the team to figure out, like, what are your priorities? What are your struggles? And on top of that, like, how can we help? Not all IT teams are usually brought into these kind of discussions. But here we try to really make sure that we work with the budgets within your constraints so that we can help tailor like a package that works best for the company.
Exactly. And when you really think about your needs, all the way from the agency all the way down to the participant, you don't think of it in all the steps that we really take care of, where infrastructure, right? We talk about that, which is really the backbone, which is your network. From the internet all the way to each cable it runs to each PC or Wi-Fi to laptop, right? We provide that technical support to your staff. And in our case, we'll do it to the advocates. We'll also do it to participants if necessary, right? And not that it's necessary, but we want to make sure that everybody's taken care of. Then we'll also manage the network, right? Yep. So there's a lot to that. You think, hey, once we plug in the cable, it works. It's not always the case. Then our big hot button, and we've talked about it several times, is cybersecurity. We'll get into that just a little bit deeper. We also offer help desk support. Again, users call, advocates call, whomever, there's somebody there to support you. Cloud services, where's all your data stored? So a couple other things we talk about. And then backup solutions, right? Some of you guys still have servers, some of you don't. What happens if something goes wrong with that server? And then furthermore, whether you have a server or not, what is your disaster recovery plans? What's happening? We try to give you, business continuity. We talk about cost efficiencies, improvements and management. So if we kind of hit on that, Dax, give us a little bit about infrastructure and network management that these folks may not understand that we do.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the best things that helps, really support the infrastructure is we have, multiple tools that will keep an eye out on not only just the uptime of the device, but how is it performing? Does it have all the required software that it needs? Is that software working as it should? There's a lot more to, is the device online, right? Because I mean, that part's easy. You press a power button, most of the time it turns on. It's after it's on, is it, maintaining that infrastructure to perform to the best of its ability within the lifespan of the device, right? And on top of that, network management, a little bit different than overall infrastructure, because now we have to take into account signal strength. Is there other things that are affecting your wireless network? Are there things that are slowing down your hardwire connections? So a lot of the tools that we utilize to monitor and actively assess your networks alert us on these things that really help keep you guys at 100% uptime. Well, within within a little bit of a degree, but you know, it helps to ensure that your network is running as you would expect.
So as we look at a couple of these bullet points, I want to hit on help desk support. At ShowTech, we're a little different. We expect you to call. We are on call 24/7, ready for the call, and make sure that your users are supported. A lot of other firms are email. So as we start looking at efficiency and we start looking at costs, we start looking at these things, how much, or excuse me, how long can you be without an answer? So we try to offer that to you all at a much faster rate or rate of answering. So when you go out and you're looking at providers, make sure you understand your first line of support, your second line of support, and what is the most efficient way for you to get your answers to your questions. Okay. Same thing about backup solutions and disaster plans. What's it really cost for you guys to have a backup plan and a good disaster plan? Well, we would walk through that with you. Again, if you got servers, that's a whole different game, right? Because those need to be protected in a hurricane or what happens if they go down. Whereas your disaster plan may be a lot cheaper if it's already in the cloud and everybody can go to your local Starbucks in a sense and work. Okay. And I'm not saying that you need to look at it right now and go, hey, we need to get rid of servers. But as you guys are starting to go through budget constraints and look at this and look at that, and my servers need to be upgraded, you need to walk through all these costs with your potential provider or your current provider. Advance the next slide, guys. All right. So the basics we cover, and I'm going to let Dax cover a little bit of this. And this is what everybody should be doing. This should be not only an expectation, it shouldn't even be discussed in your conversations. I guess you should just to make sure they do it, but this all should be included in everything you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are pretty much four of the four pillars that I think we like to really highlight on as far as what's included with what we do day to day. Most importantly, you know, support and patching. These two are huge because everybody knows, and you've seen the news. You know, a device is not supported anymore, or you hear about something got breached, or you know, it's vulnerable. You hear that often. So one of the biggest things is making sure your devices are patched and up to date. And without that, it really leads to vulnerabilities that can get bad actors into your network. And so patching is big. We make sure that we are patching all your devices, in addition to supporting your user base during this process and ensuring that we support them as much as possible. These are two very important things for sure.
Absolutely. And when we look at this, we look at patching, you think, oh boy, I have to go out and I have to hit update or something like that. Most providers, if not all providers, will have a tool that runs in the background that will patch your computers. And there's every Patching Tuesday, which is a Microsoft thing where they put out all these patches. And what you got to remember is, and ask your provider or potential providers, when do you patch? We typically wait about a week to make sure that the patch is not a problem, unless it is an emergency patch or something like that for security. But patching is the main pillar of keeping you secure. Now, a couple comments about patching. If you have an older machine, if your machine is Windows 7, Windows 10, or anything to that sort, the patching will stop on Windows 10 very soon. Anything before that is probably not getting patched. And those are vulnerabilities in your network at that point. So again, when we go back to cost, we go back to our budgeting. Anything that's Windows 10 or older of a PC, as a rule of thumb, you need to be thinking about upgrading and getting rid of those machines. Some of the Windows 10 machines can upgrade to Windows 11, but a majority of them cannot. So be thinking about that. That is one of the largest security problems that exists if computers are not being patched. One other thing I'd like to touch on as a basic, the repeat issues. So if Gay calls all the time because her computer has this or that problem, we should be tracking that as a provider. And we should be having that conversation with Gay's manager or whomever our primary contact is. Hey, Gay keeps having problem A. And we either need to address it by a new machine, better training, or different types of hardware support so that the efficiency of Gay is up and we know what that problem is. Likewise, if the problem is with Gay, it possibly could be with other computers and things. We're just not hearing about it. So this leads me into something that a lot of people don't do. Is it's a little bit like TSA if you're traveling, right? If you see it, report it. So anytime you have a problem, you may try to fix it yourself, you may not. Go ahead and report it. Even if it's already been reported, I would go ahead and report it because it could be isolated to one or two users and not the whole group as a whole.
Yep.
And do you see that some?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's one thing that we always encourage when people call in, you know, hey, my internet's down. Okay. You know, first things we're going to do is do some basic troubleshooting to figure out, is it isolated to the individual? Because it's important to understand that if a user can't get on the internet, that's one thing. If a whole site can't get on the internet, that's a whole different, you know, path of troubleshooting. So it's important to know if it's isolated to one, two people or more. And then just to touch on a little bit more too, as far as the repeat issues go, one of the things that, you know, I know Carrie loves to advocate for, but that I advocate as well for the team is we try to be out of a firefighter mindset of just putting out fires every day. The mindset is more, how do we be a fire inspector, a fire chief? You know, that way we can fix these problems, not every time they happen, but hopefully for good. And you can't always do that, but, you know, in the situations that you can, it's really important that we do these as quick as possible so that we affect less people overall and that your business is more efficient, you know, overall. So
Yeah, no, that's all good. And then in the basics, we also have growth, which is interesting, but the provider you hire needs to be able to grow with you, and that should be part of the basics. They may be a good fit right now, but will they be a good fit tomorrow? Will they be a good fit the following? Because you're going to be growing and expanding, and hopefully they will as well. But sometimes we see agencies that have outgrown their provider and in a stubbornness doesn't want to leave, but continue to have problems that could be solved by a bigger team, different tools, or different support methods. So just keep that in mind. Another slide. All right, so here's our big one. We've talked about it before, but we're going to go into a little bit of security. So in today's technology world, there's MSPs, which we talked about, managed service providers. There's a new term popping up, MSSP, which is a managed security group. And with the managed security group, they're not all MSPs. And likewise, not all MSPs are MSSPs. Okay, so there is some subtle differences. We do cross the line, not super far into security, but we do cover the basics. And Dax and I are going to hit a few here on the basics. So EDR,
yep, big one,
which is absolutely, it's a huge one. You want to hit into it a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can think of EDR like if, you know, your Norton antivirus from back in the day, McAfee, you've all seen it probably on your machines. You know, EDR is really the new term to encapsulate an antivirus software. Back in the day, and I won't get too into the weeds on it, but back, you know, not too long ago, they used to really just scan the file and determine, is this file malicious or the code that's within this file? Well, now they're a little bit smarter, and actually a lot smarter, what they're really doing is they're taking that file and they're looking at everything that occurs after that file was ran. So that way, because not everything's malicious. It may be on the onset, it may appear completely normal, but after it runs through what it's doing, it now spawns, a process on your computer that allows the malicious attackers to maintain connection to your device. And you may never know that if your EDR was stopping at the file level scan. And so these are why these things are important. But also, conversely, what's important is not just scanning it once and being done with it. It's constantly monitoring. And this is always happening day in, day out. And it's important to have one that is not only robust, but also doesn't make it so you can actually work. If it's scanning stuff, it's going to obviously take some resources, but the good ones don't.
Right. Well, and they got low overhead.
Yeah,
right,
low
is what
overhead,
we call
yeah,
that, right?
basically.
So another one is, and we've talked about this before, we can't stress it enough, is email. So email is like the #1 vulnerability in any business.
6.2 billion annually, I think is what they say.
Roughly 6.2 billion. And those are any scam that comes in your email, right? And we've talked about it, right? Slow approach to email is the way to go. Don't assume that somebody sent you something. Don't assume anything. So there's a series of tools that we can run and it'll scan your email. Sometimes there's email scanners before it gets to your environment. There's some that are after your environment, and there's some that constantly scan. So you want to go into a little bit how ours works?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the main one that ShowTech utilizes is what would be considered a scan after the fact. When it receives the email, it's going to do an initial scan, but it's essentially going to assume safe to an extent, not to the point where it delivers to your inbox, but it's going to pre-stage it to come in, and then it's going to do another scan where it's going to look for all of that, stuff that it's looking for. Is there word detection that indicates that it's a credential harvesting scam, financial harvesting scam, where it's trying to ask for financial information? Does it have a malicious file attached to it? Does it have a malicious link that takes you somewhere you shouldn't be going? Things like that. I think it's important to have one that's not directly blocking email as it's coming in, because the problem with those is it's just, you have to take it at its word. You have to assume that what it's saying is correct. In this case, we kind of let it in. It scans it almost immediately. You would never know if it missed it or not. It's before you even see it, it's pretty much done scanning. And then it will assess then and there, is this legitimate? If not, quarantined, and you get notified.
Right. And some people sit here and go, hey, we've got Office 365 and we have these DLP procedures in place, which is data loss prevention. And those do some fine things, right? They're going to look at an email, look for a driver's license number, social security number, or credit card number. And these are just right off the top. And those are good to have in place. And you really, though, we can't replace the user, because some email scams are so good, it does get past all the detection. And you still have to sit back, take a deep breath and go, hey, did I get an Excel sheet from the janitor? Wow, wonder why. Go ask. Or conversely, the head of the agency said, hey, send me some gift cards. Go get them, scan them. Please go ask. Don't do that. I do want to go into a little bit of the quarantine function. So an email, if an email is determined to have a problem, most will go into a quarantine. And some will give you a report, some won't. Some will put it into your junk folder. Some will have you go out to a cloud and look. You need to understand, when you guys employ a firm or you deploy a solution like this, where does the email go? Because there are false positives also. So some good email gets caught, and you need to figure that out and figure out where to go look for it. In our case, if an email is quarantined, we get an email and it tells us why it's quarantined. It'll say it's a bad email address, or the domain has been less than, a month old or days old, right? Which tells you. Because when you look at the bad actors, they can go get a domain name for about 50 cents, maybe $1. I don't know. It's really cheap now.
Really not much.
Right. And they can set up and be scamming people within minutes with a fake email address. And then they try to mask it to look like, the head of the agency or something like that. Most email security should catch that, and it should tell you it's a fake email address. So again, being budget conscious, we don't want to give away free money, but some of these security tools will cost you a little money in the beginning, but they will pay themselves off. Now, along with that is training. And this is where we find a lot of people are shorting themselves. They don't do cybersecurity training. And with cybersecurity training, it can be in any form. Sometimes it's annual, sometimes it's weekly, sometimes there's monthly. And you need to understand, and you need to probably put this in your budget if you don't have it, about training. And most trainings will cover, your annual commitment to your compliancy. But like our training, you want to go into it a little bit?
Yeah, our training is basically short, less than 10-minute assessments, modules, whatever you want to refer to it as, but essentially monthly modules that we deploy where, essentially it's, as Jay put, we use a platform called Curricula owned by Huntress. It's a great platform, actually. We are very happy with the results we're getting out of it. We found a lot more user engagement when the modules are shorter and more entertaining. Yes. So in this case, they weren't just reading a blog post and then listening to a quick video about why opening that email from the janitor with the Excel file is bad. Instead, it goes through a cartoon where it shows a little short story of why, of the person receiving that email from the janitor, opening it, what happens after, and then it also will point out what you can do as the end user to not be in that situation. I think that's the most important thing, is not punishing the person for not knowing, but how to educate the user who didn't know. Because nobody knows immediately. You got to work to that point. And so having the platform help teach you is imperative, not just show you a story.
Right. And then at the end of each one, we get a certificate that says we completed it and things to that nature. However, we thought our previous plan was going very well. And once we changed, the failure rate popped up to almost 40% on people afterwards.
Yep.
So it was really, really shocking on that.
It was eye-opening. I think we thought we were doing something a little bit better by giving it all at once to make sure that you guys, as users, weren't taking out of your work day to day as much as possible. But what we ended up finding was people disengaged with the content, oftentimes didn't even do it altogether. Right. And it just created a situation where it was really just a checkbox for compliance, not an actual tool to improve and train the user base.
And one thing I found about our system now, it's not all the questions aren't necessarily cybersecurity. They'll ask, what does the company do? Or what color bicycle is somebody riding? To make sure you're paying attention, because a lot of people just try to go to the answer or the quiz and take it and guess at the answers. So we're just going to try to reinforce here the idea that we should do cybersecurity training.
Absolutely.
So, VPN.
Yeah, I mean, we can touch on virtual private network, or VPN for short. I'm sure there's probably a large amount of people that are familiar with this, but essentially you can think of it as a way to get two things. One, I'm not at the office. How do I get to the office resources, especially when you're operating in that server environment? Or number two, the other thing is it actually takes your traffic and encrypts it in a bidirectionally encrypted tunnel pathway that makes sure that whatever you're doing on your computer is not easily accessible by people on that same network. So think of airport Wi-Fi's, hotel Wi-Fi's, Starbucks, any place where you would visit a public Wi-Fi it's not very difficult for somebody to plug into that same Wi-Fi and see what sites you're accessing and, you know, what information are you sending. Now, before I scare everybody, they're not seeing the exact credit card number directly, but they can see, you know, are you on Microsoft or Office.com logging into your Microsoft account?
Yep.
And they can actually do a injection to get in between those and put themselves in between that to intercept that traffic.
So I think what you're saying is if you're going to one of those public Wi-Fis, like at the coffee shop for gay, make sure you have a VPN or don't get on the public Wi-Fi
It's
and get to
important.
your data.
Yeah, it's important.
I'm sorry, there's one little small mistake on this thing about security. It should be hardening, not handling. So there's a new concept out called zero trust security. And basically, in terms we all understand, is I'm going to turn everything off except maybe the internet on a PC or my network. And then I try to find out, in order to like use Osnium or in order to use something else, I may have to have other ports or other things open. And then we slowly open things. So there's a big push to start hardening everything and going to zero trust. And where that becomes a problem is, and when we get to the next slide, it'll talk about hybrid users and VPN users and remote users. We'll talk about it a little bit, but think of it for right now. And you should talk to your current provider, or if you don't have one, you can always reach out and we can talk to you about hardening. Is what can be hardened in our network, what can be hardened on the PCs, what can be hardened in our firewall to make us less vulnerable. And really, that's a concept also about making our attack surface a lot smaller. So we think we got a 1x1 square, and every time we harden something or close something, we make that square a lot smaller. Just like with the training and email. Once we're training people are getting smarter, our attack surface is getting smaller. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're always talking about that with your provider. And if you are doing hardening, make sure everything is hardened to the extent, like when new PCs, new laptops come into your environment, have they followed the same policy, the same strict policy? Do they just copy user to user? And the problem with that is sometimes they get somebody with elevated security to, again, we'll use the janitor, and the janitor gets a PC that's made for accounting that's not been hardened properly, and there's a vulnerability. So always keep in mind, are we doing are we doing exactly what we need to do for each individual user at their correct level in the environment or in your agency? So think of hardening as that way. Anything to add on the?
Not really, other than just kind of to touch on the desktop or the PC hardening aspect. Most people don't realize that a computer, when you get it from, you know, the manufacturer, it's got a ton of things on it that are running in the background. You may not be even using a quarter of them, right? And what these hardening software, or I should say these hardening systems do, is they really just turn off all the stuff that your normal day-to-day end user wouldn't use. Things like being open to a remote connection that you have no intention of using. You know, that's one thing, a small little example, but it just turns off all these unnecessary services or processes that are not used day to day. So that way they're not an attack surface to be exploited.
Exactly. And another thing along the lines of PCs and laptops, and this may not be as budget friendly as you think it's going to be, but it's hard not to buy from like an Amazon or a Best Buy, and I understand that. When you buy from a company like ours or your providers, you may be paying a little bit more. In our case, we try to give it back by reducing deployment costs and things like that. But the reason that you should buy from a licensed dealer is we're selling business equipment versus mainly consumer equipment. You can go to Office Depot, you can go to Best Buy, you can go to Amazon and maybe find some business equipment. You have to look a lot harder. And even though the specs that we tell you what we're looking for, you find, on Amazon or Best Buy, they're typically cheaper, but the big thing to look for is the Windows is typically a home version, but that's not really where I'm headed. I'm headed also, most of these consumer machines come with a lot of what we call bloatware. So it's a bunch of extra software that you're never going to use, that you shouldn't use, that may have a temporary lifespan on it, or there might be duplicates of software, right? So earlier in the conversation, we were talking about McAfee and Norton. They might both be on there for you to choose. And you're right, Kyla. Yes, typically we are better support on that, and the units are better support, and they're better built typically. But again, that comes down to budget. And if you're going to stray from buying from a dealer, I do understand that. I understand it. But make sure that the final specs you send over to the dealer so they can look at it and go, okay, you're right. And like we will tell you, yes, you can probably beat our price, but here's where we'll make it up, or here's where we won't. But just remember, bloatware, bad for you. Consumer grade, typically bad for you. Not always, but you just want to make sure you're getting the best value overall, not just the cost of the machine. So, anything to add to that?
Just the only thing I could add would just be, if you are going to buy from your provider, obviously make sure that with the price you're
Next slide.
getting, that they are incorporating things like the setup, fee, the time to make sure that the user has as little downtime as possible, right?
Yep.
Because ultimately everybody knows you buy an Amazon computer, it comes to you, you turn it on, now somebody has to sit there in front of it and set it up. And now for your team, that may be cost prohibitive. So it's important to understand, what are you getting for that price you're paying through your provider?
Yeah, that's all good points. So I did want to hop over to the types of users. Okay, so we're going to look at remote, hybrid, on-site users. The reason we're going to bring this up is because the security we've been talking about and the tools we use may vary for each person, right? So we're mainly had this conversation about an on-site user. I walk in, I turn on my PC, I can go to certain websites, I can do certain things, I can't do certain things. If I'm a remote user, that may not be the case. I have my own PC at home, the agency's allowing me to dial in, and I have access to things I don't necessarily have at the office. Along with that is your provider won't have any vision into that PC. So when we look at that, what is that? Well, maybe that PC, that remote user, is not up to date with security or vulnerability patches. So maybe they have a virus on their home PC that they've just now introduced into your network. That's a problem, right? Maybe their antivirus is out of date, so that causes a problem. Maybe they're sharing that with their child that is a gamer, and they have all kinds of gaming stuff on there and other types of access to that PC they've set up where they're sharing game secrets with somebody else, and now you're getting onto a corporate network. The other big thing is when a worker is remote, we can't work on the network, right? So if you're at Starbucks, obviously we can't. If it's your house, we can kind of help you walk through some things. But again, we can't change your network to be like it would be on site. We can't do all the hardening to your normal network. So remember, you're fully functional at home, but you may have more access and greater flexibility and much more freedom than you do on site. It's because you don't have the same security rules. And there are tools that we can extend to the end user to help some of that, but not all of it, for sure.
Yeah.
You want
Yeah, I mean, basically the thing that you'd be utilizing here would be at that point like a VPN. You would, if you have a home computer that needs to access company resources, you're going to need some kind of a setup to get to those resources. Most commonly VPN, right? Thankfully, in this day and age, they're pretty secure, even on a home to corporate network access. But Carrie's right. I mean, there's not a lot of insight that we have on a device that's stationed at your house, but we can help with not having that access. We can help lock it down by requiring a VPN to get to those resources, for instance.
Absolutely. But just remember, be very vigilant and careful when you're at home. And when you do have multiple PCs at home or multiple resources, so your family has it, try not to use theirs. And definitely, if you have a PC or laptop that is property of your agency, definitely try not to let the kids use that, or the gamers, or anybody else, okay? Because you don't want them introducing anything to your PC or doing something that you don't know about. And if it is a company resource, most likely your provider or we would have our tools on it, so we would know if they were trying to manipulate the security or something to that effect.
Yeah, we'd hope it would get blocked before it comes to that, but there's always an exception.
Just be vigilant, excuse me. And then we have the hybrid user. So that's somebody that has a laptop, most likely, that goes on site, then goes home or goes somewhere else. And most likely security is going to travel with them. There's not going to be many problems with that. However, there can be problems on different people's Wi-Fis, or if they get home, their Wi-Fi may be set up differently or access may be differently, and it doesn't work with the computer or the security protocols that are set up for your on-site things or your on-site access. So when you're a remote user or a hybrid user and you need support, just remember you're not in your on-site environment. And when you reach out for support, tell them I'm at home or I'm somewhere else or I'm a hybrid user if we don't know that. And then also be patient as we try to work through and solve the problems to understand why those environments are different than what's on site. And we see that.
Yeah, pretty regularly. In this day and age, most people have the flexibility to work outside of the office if able. And that's usually one of the first things we see is, hey, I'm at Starbucks and I can't get on the VPN. And, unfortunately it happens, and we're not picking on Starbucks, we promise. Right. It just happens to be the most common one, right? And, like Carrie mentioned before, there's not really much we can do with the Starbucks Wi-Fi. We can't adjust it. We can't tweak it. We can't even see it, really. The biggest thing is making sure your computer is that we can do something to assist as much as possible. But there's really, outside of just making sure you have the software needed to access resources is about really what we can do, unfortunately.
Yeah. I do want to hit on reporting. And if you have a provider or you're looking at one, check on reports. A lot of people don't review them, but this information should still be available. But you want to ask what type of monthly reports, life cycle reporting, ticket reports, security awareness, right? So we're just going to hit on these really quickly. The monthly reports should be, track active, supported users, and the licenses. Make sure you're not paying for extra licenses that you don't need. Now with Microsoft, it's a year commitment, but with others, be able to turn them off, turn them back on. And with Microsoft, as you're approaching your update, or excuse me, your date of renewal, you can make adjustments. So make sure you're tracking your users. But even on the license, a lot of, not agencies, a lot of providers will charge by user. Ours is an automatic monthly update, up or down. Others may not be. We call to verify users at times. So make sure, again, you're checking on those because that's a budget number for you guys. Life cycle reporting. This is typically hardware. So how old's a PC? When is it due? When does it need updated? When's the warranty expiring? Right now, with budgets changing and the environment changing and PCs and laptops, just as a note, we got a note from HP and Lenovo. They're expecting a 40% increase in prices. It may be better to buy an extended warranty than buy a new PC. Life cycle reporting will do that for you. Ticket reports. What tickets are your team members opening, right? Hey, we keep opening about a printer. We keep opening about a PC. We keep having this problem. You need to be able to track those, see if they're being resolved, see if the resolution is efficient and works for your business. Security awareness. That is reporting on, are your people taking the security training? And if they're not, you need to talk to them, but that's a side note. But that should tell you who's taking, how they're doing, and if they're on par or behind. And you need to adjust your, your talks with those employees accordingly. So, anything else on reporting you think of? Slide.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just to really touch on the security awareness training one too, is it'll also keep track of the users who are not only doing the training, but who's improving, right? It's important to track not only the compliance of, is the training getting done, yes or no, but are the users improving on the training?
Yep.
And that's a huge thing to monitor, because if you pay for a product that's supposed to be offering that service and you can't track an actual improvement, it makes it almost wonder, why do I have it, right? So that's what this reporting is really helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And our last slide talks about VCIO. So it's your virtual, information officer. And a lot of you can't afford them. A lot of businesses can't afford them. But what we do is we'll fill that role. Sometimes there's a cost, sometimes there's a not, depending on what it is. But some of the stuff that should be baked in to your plan when you go out and look for a provider is, though, budgets and planning. We should be able to sit down with you once, twice a year, quarterly. Are you on budget? Are you not? Why are we not on budget? We should be able to talk about planning of projects, upgrades, enhancements, any of those things that should be fair game for any of us to sit down and talk about. And what's big about it is we take the life cycle report. We say, hey, you're going to need 10 PCs next year. It looks like 5 of them can be warranty updated. So we can really budget with you almost down to the penny, minus projects of what you need to do. Then in the planning stages, as we see problems or we see trends, you feel or see the same thing, or some of your line of business software is going to be changing or upgrading, we sit down, we plan that together. We plan the projects. So we should be able to sit down and go through your IT budget almost to the penny and give you spreadsheets of whatever you need to back your request for grant money or your request for your IT budget to your board. All that should be included with any provider. And I would recommend that you talk to them about that, especially again, as budgets are going to be big in the coming years. The other VCIO things that should be happening is we should sit back and we should talk about policies and procedures and things of that nature. What happens when we terminate somebody? How long do we keep their data? Who gets access to it? Our hardening, which we talked about earlier, that's a VCIO policy. What do we do? How do we make that happen? Other procedures, when we're just onboarding or offboarding, when we talk about the security of our server rooms or the security of the PCs where the participants might act or use, excuse me. These are all VCIO policies that we should sit down and we should talk about. And you should have a IT manual that talks about all of this. That's part of that VCIO side that's there. It's not really part of the planning and budgeting. So sometimes there's an additional cost to that, but it is something that should be available, and you should be able to talk through those with us at any time. Any other comments on that?
I don't think
You
I have
good?
much to add to that. That was pretty good.
Well, I try to be. Slide. So it's all good. So that's really kind of bringing this one to an end. I encourage you, if you have questions, to put those in. Here's a QR code. We'd love to hear from you. We have a couple more sessions to go. We'd love some topics if you guys would like to talk about them. If you have questions about the current content, we'd love to hear from you about that. If there's any ways to improve or help us at all, please let us know. We'll help you with, we'll listen to all that. We will respond to you. If you have questions about your provider or anything like that, we're happy to do that. And as I've mentioned every time, we're happy to help you. This is not a business seeking event, but we will also help you if you have a provider and you have questions or you'd like us to help interface with you on those. We will do that for you. Our heart is with what all you guys do and these agencies, and we built our business around nonprofits. So use this as much as you can, as much as you feel comfortable. If you have any questions with that at all, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll tell you if it's in our purview or not. But most things will be for what you're doing. So I'm Kerry. This is Dax. We thank you for your time. And if
Thank
you have
you.
any questions, let us know.